I was handcuffed in the back of a police car when I realized my brother had finally won. The metal bit into my wrists as we pulled away from my father's house, the house where I'd grown up, where I'd learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where Dad had taught me to change a tire on a Saturday afternoon. Now it was a crime scene, wrapped in yellow tape, swarming with officers and investigators. And I was being arrested for murder. My father's murder. Through the window, I could see my brother Daniel standing on the front lawn talking to a detective. His face was the perfect mask of grief, tears streaming down his cheeks, shoulders shaking, one hand covering his mouth like he couldn't bear the reality of what had happened. He looked devastated, destroyed, like a son who just lost his father. But I knew better. I'd known Daniel my whole life. 32 years of being his younger brother. 32 years of watching him lie, manipulate, and charm his way through life, while I played by the rules and got nowhere. As the police car turned the corner, Daniel's eyes met mine through the window, and for just a split second, so brief that anyone else would have missed it, his expression changed. The grief disappeared. His mouth curved into the smallest smile. A smile that said, "I told you I'd destroy you." Then the mask was back, and he was sobbing into the detective's shoulder. That was 4 days ago. 4 days of sitting in a cell, trying to make sense of how everything had fallen apart so completely. 4 days of detectives telling me they had evidence, solid, undeniable evidence that I'd killed my own father. 4 days of my lawyer looking at me with barely concealed doubt, like he was defending someone he knew was guilty. "They have your fingerprints on the murder weapon," he had told me yesterday, his voice flat. "They have witnesses who say you argued with your father the day before he died. They have your car on a traffic camera 2 blocks from his house at the estimated time of death. And they have your brother's testimony that you threatened to kill your father during a family dinner 3 weeks ago." "I never said that," I'd protested. "Daniel's lying. He's framing me." My lawyer had just looked at me with tired eyes. "Do you have any proof of that? Any evidence? Anything that contradicts what the police have?" I didn't. That was the problem. I had nothing except the truth, and the truth wasn't enough when my brother had spent months, maybe years, building the perfect frame. But then, this morning, something changed. My lawyer burst into the visiting room with an expression I hadn't seen before. Not doubt, not resignation, something that looked almost like hope. "Mark," he said, sitting down across from me with unusual urgency, "I need you to think very carefully. Where were you the night your father died? And I mean exactly where, minute by minute." "I've told you a dozen times," I said wearily. "I was at home, alone, working on a project in my garage. I didn't leave the house all night." "You're sure?" "I'm positive. I was building custom cabinets for a client. I worked from about 7 p.m. until almost 2 in the morning, but I was alone, so I can't prove it." My lawyer leaned forward. "Mark, what if I told you you can prove it? What if there's a video?" I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" "Your neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She has a security camera on her garage that faces the street. It's motion activated and records 24/7. She mentioned it to one of my investigators this morning when he was canvassing your neighborhood." My heart started beating faster. "Does it show my house?" "It shows your driveway. And Mark, if you really were in your garage all night working, if you never left, then the video will prove it," I finished. "It'll prove I couldn't have been at Dad's house." "Exactly. The detective in charge has already subpoenaed the footage. We should have it by this afternoon." For the first time in 4 days, I felt something other than despair. I felt hope. Because if that video showed what I knew it would show, my car sitting motionless in my driveway all night, the garage light on, no one coming or going, then everything would unravel. The fingerprints wouldn't make sense. The timeline wouldn't work. Daniel's testimony would fall apart. The perfect frame would crack wide open. "There's something else," my lawyer said, his voice dropping. "The medical examiner's preliminary report came in. Your father died between 10 p.m. and midnight. If that video shows you at home during that window—" "It will," I said with absolute certainty. "It will show exactly that." My lawyer nodded slowly. "Then we might have a case, a real case, not just reasonable doubt, but proof of innocence." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Mark, if this video proves what you say it does, we need to start thinking about who really killed your father. Because someone did. Someone who had access to your tools, someone who knew how to make it look like you, someone who—" "Daniel," I interrupted. "It was Daniel. It's always been Daniel." My lawyer didn't respond. He just gave me a long look and left. Now I'm sitting here in the cell, waiting for the video that's going to change everything. Waiting for the truth to finally come to light. Waiting to watch my brother's perfect plan collapse. But more than that, I'm thinking about how we got here. How two brothers who grew up in the same house with the same parents ended up on opposite sides of a murder investigation. I'm thinking about all the times Daniel got away with things while I took the blame for them. All the times he smiled that same small smile while I suffered the consequences of his actions. And I'm thinking about my father, about who he really was, about the secrets he kept, about the choices he made that led to this moment. Because this story doesn't start with my arrest 4 days ago. It starts much earlier than that. It starts with the truth about my family. The truth that everyone wanted buried. The truth that got my father killed. My brother Daniel was born perfect. At least that's what it seemed like growing up. He was the first child, the golden son who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. 3 years older than me, handsome, charming, naturally gifted at everything he tried. Sports, academics, social situations, Daniel excelled at all of it without even seeming to break a sweat. I was born second, the quiet one, the careful one, the son who had to work twice as hard to get half the recognition. We grew up in Cedar Hills, a small town outside of Portland, where everyone knew everyone and your reputation was everything. Our father, Richard Morrison, owned Morrison Construction, a mid-sized company that built residential homes and commercial buildings throughout the county. It wasn't a huge operation, but it was successful, respectable. The kind of business that had been in the family for 2 generations and was expected to continue for 2 more. Dad always assumed Daniel would take over the company someday. From the time Daniel was 10 years old, Dad would bring him to job sites, teach him about foundations and framing, explain how to read blueprints. Daniel would stand there in his little hard hat, soaking it all in, asking smart questions that made Dad beam with pride. I wanted to go too. I'd beg Mom to let me tag along, but she'd always say the same thing: "You're too young, Mark. When you're older." By the time I was old enough, Dad had stopped asking if I wanted to come. He and Daniel had their routine, their bond, their shared language about load-bearing walls and electrical systems. I was on the outside looking in. Mom noticed. She always noticed. Carol Morrison was a kind woman with gentle eyes and a talent for seeing what people needed even when they didn't say it out loud. She worked as a nurse at the county hospital, doing 12-hour shifts, and somehow still managing to make home-cooked dinners and remember every detail of our lives. "Your father loves you both the same," she told me once, when I was maybe 12, finding me sitting alone in the backyard while Dad and Daniel worked on a treehouse together. "Then why does he only spend time with Daniel?" I asked. She sat down beside me on the grass, pulled me close. "Your dad sees himself in Daniel. The confidence, the social skills, the natural leadership. It's easier for him to connect with someone who reminds him of himself. But that doesn't mean he loves you any less, sweetheart. It just means you and your dad need to find your own way of connecting." "What if we can't?" I asked quietly. Then you'll be okay anyway, she said, kissing the top of my head. Because you have something Daniel doesn't have. What? A good heart. Real kindness. The ability to see people as they actually are, not as you want them to be. Those things matter more than charm or confidence, Mark. Trust me. I tried to believe her, but it was hard when Daniel got all the attention, all the praise, all the opportunities. In high school, Daniel was the quarterback. I played chess. Daniel was homecoming king. I worked part-time at the library. Daniel had a different girlfriend every month. I had exactly one girlfriend my entire junior year, and she broke up with me because I was too serious. Daniel got into Stanford on a football scholarship. I went to Portland State and worked 2 jobs to pay for it because Dad said he couldn't afford to help with my tuition after spending so much on Daniel's expenses. After college, Daniel came back to Cedar Hills and went to work for Dad at Morrison Construction. He was charming with clients, good at closing deals, charismatic on job sites. Within 3 years, Dad made him VP of Operations. I got my degree in accounting and took a job at a small firm downtown. Steady work, boring work, work that paid the bills but didn't set my soul on fire. But I was okay with that. I'd accepted my role in the family, the steady, responsible one who didn't cause problems and didn't ask for much. Then Mom got sick. It started with fatigue she couldn't shake, then unexplained bruising, then a diagnosis that changed everything: acute myeloid leukemia. She fought hard. 6 months of brutal chemotherapy that left her weak and nauseous and barely recognizable. Dad tried to be there for her, but the business demanded his time. Daniel was supposed to help pick up the slack, but he was always busy with meetings or job sites or client dinners. So I took care of her. I moved back home temporarily. I took her to appointments, sat with her during chemo sessions, held her hand when she cried, made her smoothies when she couldn't keep solid food down. I rearranged my work schedule, used all my vacation time, went into debt paying for things insurance didn't cover. Daniel visited maybe once a week. He'd stay for an hour, tell Mom stories about work to keep her spirits up, then leave saying he had important business to handle. "I don't know what I'd do without you," Mom told me one night after a particularly hard round of treatment. We were sitting in her bedroom, the same room where she'd tucked me in as a child, and she looked so small in that big bed. "I don't know what you'd do without me," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." "Your brother tries," she said softly. "He's just not built for this kind of thing. He doesn't know how to handle pain or sadness. He shuts down." "He should try harder," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "Mark," she squeezed my hand, "don't let resentment poison you. Daniel is who he is. You can't change that. You can only decide who you want to be." 3 months later, Mom died. The funeral was on a gray Saturday in November. The church was packed. Mom had touched a lot of lives through her work at the hospital. People stood up and shared stories about her kindness, her compassion, her gift for making people feel seen and valued. Daniel gave the eulogy. He stood at the podium in a perfectly tailored black suit and spoke about what an amazing mother she had been, how much she had taught him, how her memory would live on in all of us. His voice cracked in all the right places. His tears came at all the right moments. People told him afterwards how brave he was, how eloquent, how much Mom would have been proud. No one mentioned that I'd been the one taking care of her, that I had been the one who held her hand when she died, that I had been the one she'd asked for in those final hours. After the funeral, Dad pulled Daniel and me aside in the church basement. "I know this is hard," he said, his voice rough with grief, "but we're still a family. We stick together. We honor your mother's memory by staying strong." "Of course, Dad," Daniel said, putting his hand on Dad's shoulder. "Whatever you need." He looked at me. "Mark, you good?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to say I was angry that Daniel had barely shown up during Mom's illness. I wanted to say I resented being taken for granted. I wanted to say that staying strong felt like code for don't make waves. But I just nodded. "Yeah, Dad, I'm good." Over the next 2 years, I tried to find my place in the family again. I moved out of Dad's house and into a small rental on the other side of town. I went back to work full-time. I started doing woodworking as a hobby, building furniture in my garage on weekends, finding peace in the straightforward logic of measuring, cutting, and assembling. Dad and Daniel grew closer at the company. With Mom gone, they spent even more time together. Dad started talking seriously about retirement, about transitioning ownership to Daniel within the next 5 years. I was never part of those conversations. Once, about a year after Mom died, I asked Dad if there might be a place for me at Morrison Construction. We were at his house for Sunday dinner, a tradition Daniel had insisted we maintain to honor Mom's memory, though Daniel himself only showed up about half the time. "I've been thinking," I said carefully over dessert. "I'm pretty burned out on accounting, and I've been doing a lot of woodworking lately, getting pretty good at it. I was wondering if maybe there might be an opportunity at the company. I could learn the business, start at the bottom, work my way up." Dad and Daniel exchanged a look. "Mark, the construction business isn't for everyone," Dad said slowly. "It takes a certain personality. You have to be tough, decisive, willing to take risks. No offense, son, but you've always been more of a steady, behind-the-scenes kind of guy." "I could learn," I said. "I'm good with my hands. I'm detail-oriented. The thing is," Daniel interrupted smoothly, "we've got a pretty tight crew right now. Everyone knows their role. Bringing in someone new, especially family, it could complicate the dynamic. You understand, right, little brother?" Little brother. He always called me that when he wanted to remind me of my place. "Right," I said quietly. "I understand." Dad patted my hand. "You've got a good job, Mark. Stable, secure, that's nothing to be ashamed of. Not everyone needs to be an entrepreneur or run a company. The world needs accountants too." I didn't bring it up again. Things continued like that for another year. Daniel thrived at Morrison Construction. I stayed in my accounting job and built furniture in my garage. Dad's health started declining. Nothing serious, just the normal wear of a man in his late 60s who'd worked hard his whole life. Then, about 6 months ago, everything changed. I got a call one Tuesday evening from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Mark Morrison?" A woman's voice, professional but urgent. "Yes?" "This is Janet Torres. I'm an attorney here in Cedar Hills. I'm calling about your father, Richard Morrison." My stomach dropped. "Is he okay?" "He's fine, physically, but he came to see me today about a legal matter, and he mentioned he has 2 sons. He gave me permission to reach out to you. I think you need to know what's going on." "What do you mean?" "Mr. Morrison, your father came to me because he wants to change his will. Specifically, he wants to disinherit your brother Daniel and leave everything to you. The company, the house, his savings, all of it. But there's more to it than that. Your father has information about financial irregularities at Morrison Construction. He believes your brother has been embezzling from the company." I stood there in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process what she was saying. "That's impossible," I said. "Daniel would never." "Your father has been tracking suspicious transactions for the past 8 months. Large withdrawals, falsified invoices, payments to shell companies. He estimates your brother has stolen somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000. $400,000? Why are you telling me this? Why not just handle it through the legal system? Because your father is afraid. He says your brother has a temper. He's worried about what might happen if Daniel finds out he's been caught. He wanted someone else to know what was going on in case... She trailed off, but the implication was clear. In case something happened to Dad. I need to talk to my father. She asked me to tell you not to confront him directly yet. She wants to gather more evidence first, make sure it's airtight. She's planning to file a police report next week, but she wanted you to know now so you're prepared. After we hung up, I sat in the dark kitchen for a long time. Daniel had been stealing from Dad, from the family company, from the legacy our grandfather had built and our father had spent his life maintaining. And Dad had known for months without telling me? I called Dad that night. "You should have told me," I said when he answered. He sighed. "Janet called you." "Yeah. Dad, why didn't you come to me first? Why did I have to hear this from a lawyer?" "Because I wasn't sure," he admitted. "I wanted to be absolutely certain before I involved you. Daniel's my son. Even with the evidence, part of me hoped I was wrong." "But you're not wrong?" "No, I'm not wrong. I've triple-checked everything. Daniel's been systematically stealing from the company for at least 2 years, maybe longer. And Mark, there's something else." "What?" "I think your mother knew, or suspected. About 6 months before she died, she asked me some strange questions about the business finances, about whether I'd noticed any discrepancies. I brushed it off at the time. She was so sick, and I thought maybe the medication was making her confused. But now I think she'd figured it out. I think that's why she made me promise to take care of you, to make sure you were okay no matter what happened with Daniel." I closed my eyes. Even dying, Mom had been trying to protect me. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I'm going to the police next week. I'm going to turn over all the evidence and let them handle it. And I'm changing my will. Morrison Construction goes to you, Mark, if you want it, if you're willing to take it on." "Dad, I don't know anything about running a construction company." "You'll learn. You're smart, honest, and you care about doing things right. That's more important than experience. And Mark?" "Yeah? I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see you clearly all these years. I'm sorry I favored Daniel. I'm sorry I didn't give you the opportunities I should have. Your mother tried to tell me, but I was too stubborn to listen. I see it now, though. I see who you really are, and I'm proud of you, son." I couldn't speak. There was a lump in my throat the size of a fist. "We'll get through this," Dad continued. "As a family. It's going to be ugly, but we'll get through it." But we didn't get through it. Because 3 days later, Dad was dead. The call came at 6:30 in the morning. I was getting ready for work, halfway through my first cup of coffee when my phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. We hadn't spoken in almost 2 weeks, not since that awkward Sunday dinner where Dad had been unusually quiet and Daniel had dominated the conversation with stories about a big commercial project Morrison Construction had just landed. "Hello?" "Mark." Daniel's voice was shaking. "You need to come to Dad's house now." "What's wrong?" "It's Dad. Mark, he's dead." The coffee mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the kitchen floor. Hot liquid splashed across my feet, but I barely felt it. "What?" "I came by this morning to pick him up for a breakfast meeting. He didn't answer the door. I used my key to get in and found him in the garage. There was blood everywhere. Someone..." His voice cracked. "Someone killed him, Mark. Someone murdered our father." I was already grabbing my keys, running for the door. "Did you call 911? "They're here now. Police, ambulance, everyone. Just get here." The drive to Dad's house took 12 minutes. It felt like 12 hours. My mind was racing. Dad was going to the police next week. He was going to expose Daniel's embezzlement. He was going to change his will. And now he was dead. No, it couldn't be. Daniel wouldn't. He was my brother. No matter how selfish or manipulative he could be, he wouldn't murder our father. Would he? Dad's street was chaos when I arrived. Police cars, an ambulance, a medical examiner's van, neighbors standing on their lawns in bathrobes watching, yellow crime scene tape already going up around the property. I parked haphazardly and ran toward the house. A uniformed officer stopped me at the driveway. "Sir, you can't go in there. This is an active crime scene." "That's my father," I said desperately. "Richard Morrison, that's my dad." The officer's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry for your loss, sir, but you still can't enter the premises. If you'll just wait over here, a detective will come speak with you shortly." I stood there on the sidewalk, staring at the house where I'd grown up. The front door was open. People in uniforms and latex gloves moved in and out. Cameras flashed from inside the garage. Dad was in there. My father was dead in there. "Mark." I turned to see Daniel walking toward me, his face pale and drawn. He looked genuinely shaken, eyes red, hands trembling, shirt untucked like he'd dressed in a hurry. He pulled me into a hug. I stood there stiffly, my mind still spinning. "I can't believe it," Daniel said into my shoulder. "Who would do this? Who would want to hurt Dad?" I pulled back and looked at him, really looked at him, searching for any sign that this was an act. But all I saw was shock and grief. "What exactly happened?" I asked. "I told you. I came to pick him up around 6:15. We had a breakfast meeting with a potential client. Dad wasn't answering his phone, so I figured maybe he overslept. I used my key to get in, called for him, no answer. Then I went to the garage and..." He stopped, swallowing hard. He was lying on the floor near his workbench. There was a hammer next to him, blood on his head. I checked for a pulse, but he was already cold. He'd been dead for hours. A hammer. Dad's workbench. "Did you touch anything?" "What? No. I checked his pulse, but that was it. Then I called 911. A detective approached us. A tall black woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "I'm Detective Sarah Williams. You're the victim's sons?" "Yes," Daniel said. "I'm Daniel Morrison. This is my younger brother, Mark." "I'm very sorry for your loss," Detective Williams said, pulling out a notepad. "I know this is difficult, but I need to ask you both some questions. Daniel, you discovered the body?" "Yes, ma'am." "And what time was that?" "Around 6:20 this morning." "You said you had a breakfast meeting with your father?" "Yes, at 7 o'clock with a client. I came to pick Dad up." "Was it unusual for you to pick him up?" "No, we carpooled to meetings sometimes. We worked together at the family construction company." Detective Williams made notes, then turned to me. "And Mark, where were you this morning?" "At home, getting ready for work." "What time did you leave your house?" "I didn't. I was still there when Daniel called me about Dad." "Anyone who can verify that?" I shook my head. "I live alone." More notes. "When was the last time either of you saw your father alive?" Daniel spoke first. "Sunday dinner, 4 days ago. We have a weekly family dinner tradition." Detective Williams looked at me. "Were you there as well?" "Yes." "How did your father seem? Any indication he was worried about anything? Any conflicts or problems he mentioned?" Daniel and I looked at each other. I could see the warning in his eyes. Don't say anything about the embezzlement. Not yet. But I had to. The police needed to know. "Actually," I started. Dad seemed fine," Daniel interrupted smoothly. "Maybe a little tired, but that was normal. He'd been working hard." Detective Williams caught the tension between us. "Mark, you were about to say something." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to blurt out everything. The embezzlement, the will change, Dad's plan to go to the police. But another part of me held back. What if I was wrong? What if Daniel really hadn't done this? What if I accused my brother of murder and destroyed what was left of our family based on suspicion? "Nothing," I said finally. "Just that Dad had mentioned he was tired lately, that's all." Detective Williams studied me for a long moment, clearly not buying it. "If there's something you need to tell me, now is the time." "There's nothing," Daniel said firmly. "Our father was a good man, he ran a successful business, he didn't have enemies. This must have been a robbery gone wrong or something random." "We'll determine that," Detective Williams said. "The scene suggests this wasn't random. There's no signs of forced entry, nothing appears to have been stolen. Your father's wallet was still in his pocket, his watch still on his wrist. This looks personal." "What do you mean, personal?" Daniel asked. "I mean someone came to that house specifically to kill your father. Someone who knew him. Someone he likely let into his home." The implication hung in the air. "We'll need both of you to come down to the station later today to give formal statements. We'll also need to know your whereabouts last night between approximately 8 p.m. and midnight. That's our estimated time of death window." I was home, alone, working in my garage on a woodworking project. I was home too, with my girlfriend Stephanie. We had dinner together, watched a movie, went to bed around 11. Of course Daniel had an alibi. Of course. "We'll need to verify all of that," Detective Williams said. "In the meantime, please don't discuss the details of this case with anyone outside of law enforcement. And if you think of anything at all that might be relevant, call me immediately." She handed us each a business card and walked away. Daniel turned to me, his voice low. "What were you about to tell her?" "The truth," I said, "about what Dad told me, about the embezzlement." His face went cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me, Daniel. Dad knew. He had evidence. He was going to the police next week." "That's insane," Daniel said, but his eyes were calculating. "Dad never said anything to me about any embezzlement, because you're the one who was stealing from him." Daniel grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "Listen to me very carefully, little brother. Our father just died. This is not the time to spread crazy conspiracy theories based on nothing. You're grieving. You're not thinking straight." "Let go of me," I said quietly. "Dad's lawyer called you, didn't she? Janet Torres, what did she tell you?" "That you've been stealing from Morrison Construction for years, that Dad was changing his will to cut you out, that he was afraid of what you might do if you found out." Daniel released my arm and stepped back. His expression shifted through several emotions: shock, anger, calculation, before settling on something that looked almost like pity. "Mark, I'm going to say this once. I never stole anything from Dad or the company. Whatever Janet Torres told you is based on a misunderstanding. Dad's been under a lot of stress lately. He's been making mistakes with the books, getting confused. I've been trying to help him clean it up, but he got paranoid and thought I was doing something wrong. It's sad, really. His mind was starting to go." "His mind was fine," I said. "Was it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you had just as much motive to kill Dad as anyone, maybe more." "What are you talking about?" "Think about it," Daniel said softly. "Dad's been distant from you your whole life. You've always been jealous of my relationship with him. Then suddenly, he starts telling you these stories about me stealing, about changing his will to favor you. Maybe you saw an opportunity. Maybe you decided to speed things along." I stared at him in disbelief. "You're trying to frame me." "I'm not trying to do anything except figure out who killed our father." Daniel's voice was steady, reasonable. But if the police start looking into this, they're going to discover some interesting facts, like that argument you and Dad had 3 weeks ago. We didn't have an argument. Sunday dinner, March 15th. You and Dad got into it about the business, about your future, about how you felt overlooked your whole life. It got pretty heated. You stormed out, remember? I did remember that dinner, but it hadn't been an argument. It had been a difficult conversation. I'd asked Dad again about working at Morrison Construction, and he gently but firmly said no. I'd been disappointed, sure, frustrated even, but I hadn't stormed out. I'd just left quietly after dinner. But Daniel could spin it differently, make it sound worse than it was. "You're lying," I said. "Am I? We'll see what Dad's neighbors remember, what the people at his church remember, what his friends remember about how you two got along." He leaned closer. "Face it, Mark. You're the one with motive. You're the one who was angry at Dad. You're the one who doesn't have an alibi." "I didn't kill him." "Then you have nothing to worry about, do you?" Daniel smiled that small smile, the one that haunted me since childhood, the one that said he'd already won. He walked away, leaving me standing on the sidewalk in the morning sun, watching police officers document the scene where my father had been murdered. And that's when I realized Daniel had planned this. Maybe not the murder itself. I still couldn't quite believe he'd actually killed Dad. But everything else, the narrative, the story he'd tell, the evidence that would point toward me. He'd known about Dad's plan to expose him. Somehow he'd found out, and he'd moved first. Over the next 3 days, the evidence mounted against me. The murder weapon, a claw hammer from Dad's garage, had my fingerprints on it, which made sense because I'd used Dad's tools dozens of times over the years. But in the context of a murder investigation, it looked damning. The neighbors Detective Williams interviewed told her about the argument I'd had with Dad. Daniel's version of events, heated, angry, storm out, became the accepted truth. Traffic cameras caught my car 2 blocks from Dad's house at 9:47 p.m. the night he died. Never mind that I drove past that intersection every time I went to visit Dad. Never mind that I wasn't actually going to his house that night. I'd just been driving home from the hardware store. The timestamp put me in the area during the estimated death time. And then there was Daniel's testimony about the death threat. According to Daniel, 3 weeks ago at that Sunday dinner, I said in front of him that I was so angry I could kill Dad. He'd told this to Detective Williams, told her I seemed unstable, resentful, jealous of his relationship with our father. I didn't want to believe my own brother could do something like this, Daniel had told the detective, his voice breaking. But the more I think about it, the more I remember little signs, comments Mark made, the way he'd look at Dad sometimes. I should have seen it coming. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. Every detail carefully constructed to paint me as the angry, jealous younger son who finally snapped. My lawyer tried to poke holes in the case, tried to argue that circumstantial evidence wasn't enough. But even he seemed doubtful. "The problem is," he said during one of our meetings, "you don't have a solid alibi. You were alone in your garage, no one saw you, no one can verify you were there all night. Because I was home. Normal people don't arrange witnesses for their normal evenings at home." I know, but in a murder investigation, normal isn't enough. We need proof. And I didn't have any. That was the genius of Daniel's plan. He'd framed me knowing I'd be alone that night, knowing I couldn't prove my whereabouts, knowing that all the circumstantial evidence would add up to a damning picture. On the 4th day, they arrested me. Detective Williams herself came to my house with 2 uniformed officers. She read me my rights while my neighbors watched from their porches. She put handcuffs on my wrists and walked me to the patrol car. "I didn't do this," I told her. "My brother is setting me up. He's the one who was stealing from Dad. He's the one with motive." "We've investigated those allegations," Detective Williams said calmly. "We've looked at Morrison Construction's financial records. There's no evidence of embezzlement. The company books are clean." "That's impossible. Dad had evidence." "What evidence? Where is it?" And I didn't know, because Dad had kept the evidence to himself, planning to turn it over to the police. But he died before he could do it. And now either that evidence was gone, destroyed, or Daniel had cleaned up the financial records before the police could find anything. Janet Torres, Dad's lawyer. She knows about the embezzlement, the evidence, Dad's fear of Daniel. We've spoken to Ms. Torres, Detective Williams said. She confirms that your father came to see her about changing his will, but she says he never mentioned embezzlement. He just said he wanted to leave more to you because he felt he'd been unfair to you over the years. That's all. No, that wasn't right. Janet had told me specifically about the embezzlement, the evidence, Dad's fear of Daniel. Unless she was lying now. Unless Daniel had gotten to her somehow. Or unless she decided it was better to stay silent than to get involved in a murder case based on a dead man's suspicions. This is wrong, I said as they put me in the back of the patrol car. Everything about this is wrong. Daniel was standing on his front lawn watching. When our eyes met, he mouthed 2 words. I win. That was 4 days ago. 4 days of sitting in this cell while Daniel walked free. 4 days of knowing he'd killed our father and framed me for it. 4 days of feeling powerless while the system slowly ground toward what seemed like my inevitable conviction. Until this morning, when my lawyer told me about the video. Mrs. Chen's security camera, the one that faced the street, the one that recorded 24/7. If that video showed what I knew it would show, my car in my driveway all night, me in my garage working, no trip to Dad's house, then everything would change. The fingerprints on the hammer? Daniel could have planted them. He'd been in Dad's garage that morning. He could have wiped down the hammer and pressed my hand against it when he checked for a pulse. The traffic camera? Just me driving home from the hardware store, nowhere near Dad's house at the time of the murder. The death threat? Daniel's lie, easily disproved if we could show he had motive to frame me. The video was the key to everything, the proof that I'd been telling the truth all along. And by this afternoon, everyone would see it. I'd been watching the clock on the wall of my cell, counting down the minutes until he'd have the security footage. Every second felt like an hour. Every sound in the hallway made me think it was him coming with news. When the guard finally came to escort me to the visiting room, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Tom Harris was already sitting at the table when I entered. He was 52 years old, balding, with reading glasses perpetually perched on the end of his nose. He'd been recommended to me by a friend from work, not a high-powered criminal defense attorney, but competent and thorough. A former public defender who'd gone into private practice and handled mostly DUIs and minor drug charges. This was his first murder case. But right now, looking at his face as I sat down, I didn't see the usual careful neutrality. I saw something else. Excitement. You got it, I said. You got the video. I got it, Tom confirmed, pulling a laptop from his briefcase and setting it on the table between us. Mark, this changes everything. He turned the laptop toward me and pressed play. The footage was black and white, grainy but clear enough. The timestamp in the corner read the date of Dad's murder. The camera angle showed the street in front of Mrs. Chen's house, and just visible on the right side of the frame was my driveway and the front of my garage. Tom fast-forwarded through the evening. At 7:13 p.m., my car pulled into the driveway. That was me coming home from the hardware store. I got out, went into the house briefly, then the garage door opened and I went inside. The garage light stayed on. Tom sped up the footage, the timestamp racing forward. 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 9:47 p.m., the exact time the traffic camera supposedly caught me near Dad's house. But my car was sitting motionless in my driveway. The garage light was still on, no movement, no one coming or going. 10 p.m., 11 p.m., midnight. Dad's estimated time of death, between 10 p.m. and midnight. And during that entire window, I was clearly at home. Tom paused the video at 1:47 a.m. That's when the garage light finally went off, and a few minutes later, I emerged, locked up, and went into my house. This is it, I breathed. This proves I couldn't have killed Dad. It does, Tom agreed. But Mark, there's more. Something I need you to see. He rewound the video back to earlier in the evening, back to around 6 p.m., several hours before I'd gotten home. Mrs. Chen's camera is motion activated. It records constantly, but it flags any movement in the frame. Watch this. At 6:23 p.m., a figure appeared in the frame walking down the sidewalk past Mrs. Chen's house. The person was wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap pulled low, but the build and gait were distinctive. The figure walked to my driveway, looked around briefly, then approached my garage. From a pocket, the person pulled out what looked like a key, used it to open the side door of my garage, and went inside. 7 minutes later, the person emerged and walked back down the street the way they'd come. Tom paused the video. Recognize him? Even with the cap obscuring their face, even with the grainy quality of the footage, I knew who it was. The way he walked, the slight swagger, the tilt of his head. Daniel, I said. That's Daniel. That's what I thought too. I've already sent this footage to Detective Williams, along with a formal request to have your charges dropped and an investigation opened into your brother. I stared at the frozen image on the screen. My brother breaking into my garage the night of the murder. What was he doing in there? My guess? Planting evidence, taking your tools to use in the murder, maybe even taking something with your fingerprints to leave at the scene. Whatever he did, he was setting you up long before the actual killing happened. I thought about my garage, my tools, the claw hammer that had been used to kill Dad. Had that been mine? Had Daniel taken it from my workshop that evening, used it to kill our father, then placed it in Dad's garage to be found? There's more, Tom said, pulling up another file on his laptop. I also got access to Morrison Construction's recent financial records, the ones the police supposedly reviewed and found clean. Want to know what I discovered? What? They've been altered, recently, within the last week actually. Someone went through and cleaned up discrepancies, moved money around, made everything look legitimate. And the electronic signature on those changes? It's your brother's. So Daniel cleaned up the books after Dad died, before the police could see the evidence. Exactly. But he didn't know about the backups. Every financial software keeps automatic backups. I got a court order to have Morrison Construction's IT system analyzed, and we found backup files before your father's death. And Mark, those files show exactly what your father discovered. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent transactions, all traced back to Daniel. I leaned back in my chair, my mind reeling. So we have Daniel on camera breaking into my garage the night of the murder? We have evidence he was embezzling from the company? We have proof I was home when Dad was killed? That's enough, right? That's enough to clear me and arrest Daniel? It should be, Tom said carefully. But there's a complication. What complication? Your brother has a very good lawyer. Apparently, he hired Richard Klein this morning. I felt my stomach drop. Richard Klein was the most expensive criminal defense attorney in Portland, the kind of lawyer who'd gotten drug dealers and white-collar criminals off on technicalities, the kind of lawyer you hired when you were guilty and rich enough to buy your way out. How does Daniel afford Richard Klein? Even with what he stole from Dad, that can't be enough to... He put up Morrison Construction as collateral for the legal fees. He's betting everything that he can beat this. But he can't beat video evidence. He can't explain away being at my house that night. Klein will try. He'll say Daniel had a legitimate reason to be there, that you asked him to pick something up from your garage, that he has a spare key you gave him, that his presence at your house doesn't prove anything except he's your brother, and brothers have access to each other's homes. And the embezzlement? Klein will argue the financial records were altered by someone else, that your father was confused, that the backup files might be corrupted or falsified. He'll throw doubt on everything. I'm saying it's not a slam dunk, but Mark, it's enough to get you released. The video of you at home during the time of the murder, that's irrefutable. You physically couldn't have killed your father. The prosecutor knows it, Detective Williams knows it. They're processing your release right now. What about Daniel? They're bringing him in for questioning. Whether they arrest him depends on what happens in that interview. If he has answers for everything, if his lawyer ties them up in knots with legal technicalities, we might not have enough to charge him yet. Yet? These things take time. They'll investigate, build a stronger case, gather more evidence. Eventually they'll have enough, but it might take weeks, maybe months. I thought about Daniel walking free while the investigation crawled forward. Thought about him at Dad's funeral, playing the grieving son. Thought about him taking over Morrison Construction, now that Dad was gone and I was in jail. "Wait," I said suddenly. "If Dad was changing his will to leave everything to me and Dad died before the change was finalized, then the old will stands. And in the old will, Morrison Construction goes to Daniel, along with everything else. The house, the savings, all of it. As the firstborn son, he inherits the bulk of the estate." Daniel had killed our father and was going to profit from it. Even if he eventually went to prison, he'd have weeks or months to drain Morrison Construction, sell assets, hide money. "We need to stop him," I said. "We need to freeze the estate, get a court order." "Already working on it," I assured him. "I filed an emergency motion citing the evidence of embezzlement and arguing that Daniel should be barred from accessing the estate until the investigation is complete. But again, these things take time. Klein will fight it every step of the way." A guard knocked on the door. "Time's up." "One more minute," Tom called, then turned back to me. "Mark, listen to me. You're going to be released this afternoon. You're going home. Your name will be cleared, but Daniel is dangerous. He's already killed once to protect himself. Don't confront him. Don't go near him. Let the police handle this." "Okay," I said. But I was already thinking about what I needed to do, because there was one piece of this puzzle we hadn't found yet. One thing that could connect all the dots and make the case against Daniel undeniable. Dad's evidence. The files he'd compiled documenting Daniel's embezzlement. The proof he'd gathered before planning to go to the police. Janet Torres had mentioned it. Dad himself had told me about it. That evidence was somewhere, and if I could find it before Daniel did, if I could turn it over to the police, it would be game over. They released me at 5:30 p.m. Tom drove me home, my car was still impounded as part of the investigation, and walked me to my door to make sure everything was secure. "Remember what I said, stay away from Daniel. Let the police handle it." "I will," I promised. But as soon as Tom's car disappeared around the corner, I was back in mine. I'd retrieved the spare key from its hiding place in my garage, and driving toward the one place I knew I needed to go. Dad's house. The crime scene tape was still up, but the police had finished processing the scene. The house was dark, empty, locked. But I had my own key. I'd kept it since I'd stayed with Dad during Mom's illness. I parked a block away and approached on foot, staying in the shadows. The last thing I needed was a neighbor calling the cops on me for breaking into my own father's house. The key turned smoothly in the lock. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me, standing in the dark entryway of the house where I'd grown up. It smelled different now. Chemical. The lingering scent of whatever substances the crime scene techs had used to process evidence. But underneath that, it still smelled like Dad. Like coffee and sawdust and the Old Spice aftershave he'd worn my whole life. I couldn't go into the garage, couldn't face the space where he died. Instead, I went to his home office, a small room off the living room where he'd handled the business side of Morrison Construction. The desk drawers were partially open. The police had searched them. File cabinets were unlocked. Papers were scattered across the desk. I started methodically going through everything. Bank statements, invoice copies, employee records, tax documents, all the normal administrative detritus of running a business. But nothing about the embezzlement. Nothing that looked like evidence Dad had compiled. Where would he hide it? Where would he put something he wanted kept safe but accessible? I thought about Dad, about how his mind worked. He was a practical man. He wouldn't use a safe, too obvious. Wouldn't store it digitally. He barely trusted computers. He'd want physical copies of everything, but somewhere they wouldn't be found in a cursory search. Mom's voice came back to me, a memory from years ago. Your father thinks he's so clever, but he's been hiding birthday presents in the same spot for 20 years. The attic. I found the pull-down stairs in the upstairs hallway and climbed into the hot, dusty space. Boxes were stacked everywhere. Christmas decorations, old clothes, childhood memorabilia. And in the far corner, underneath a tarp covered with dust, I found a file box I didn't recognize. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were folders, dozens of them, each one meticulously labeled with dates. And inside those folders were photocopies of checks, bank statements, invoices, receipts, all highlighting irregular transactions at Morrison Construction. But it wasn't just financial documents. There were emails, printed out and highlighted, correspondence between Daniel and various shell companies, communications about consulting fees and equipment purchases that Dad had marked as fraudulent. There were photographs. Daniel meeting with a man I didn't recognize in the parking lot of Morrison Construction, exchanging what looked like an envelope. There were handwritten notes in Dad's precise script, tracking patterns, calculating totals, documenting everything. At the bottom of the box was a flash drive with a note taped to it. Complete digital copies. If anything happens to me, give to police. Dad known it. He'd documented everything. He'd prepared for the possibility that Daniel might come after him. But he hadn't prepared well enough. I was pulling the flash drive from the box when I heard a sound downstairs. The front door opening. Footsteps in the entryway. Someone else was in the house. I froze, the flash drive clutched in my hand, my heart hammering. The footsteps moved through the first floor, slow, methodical. Someone searching. Then a voice called out, "Mark, I know you're here. Your car's down the street. Weren't as sneaky as you thought." Daniel. I stayed perfectly still in the attic, barely breathing. "Come on, little brother," Daniel's voice drifted up from below. "Let's talk about this like adults. I know what you're looking for. I know what Dad had on me. But here's the thing. That evidence doesn't matter anymore. You know why?" He was moving again, coming upstairs. "Because I've already cleaned everything up. The company records are spotless. The financial trail is gone. Even if you found Dad's little collection of papers up there in the attic, yeah, I know about his hiding spot too. It won't matter. My lawyer will tear it apart. He'll say Dad was confused, senile, paranoid. He'll say those records are incomplete and misleading." Daniel's footsteps stopped at the bottom of the attic stairs. "But you coming here tonight? Breaking into a crime scene? Stealing evidence? That looks bad, Mark. That looks like a guilty man trying to cover his tracks. So why don't you come down from there and we'll figure out how to handle this together?" I didn't move. I could hear Daniel breathing, waiting. "Fine," he said finally. "Have it your way." The attic stairs began to unfold. Daniel was coming up. I looked around desperately for another way out, but the attic only had one entrance. I was trapped. Daniel's head appeared above the floor level, then his shoulders. Then he was standing in the attic with me, blocking the only exit. He looked different in the dim light filtering through the attic vent. Not like the charming, successful businessman everyone saw. Not like the grieving son he'd played at the funeral. He looked cold, calculated, dangerous. "Give me the flash drive," he said calmly. "No. Daniel, don't be stupid. You've already been cleared of Dad's murder. The video proved you were home. You're free. Why risk that by involving yourself further?" Because you killed our father, I said, my voice shaking with anger. Because you stole from him, and when he was about to expose you, you murdered him. Daniel sighed. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I tried to reason with him. I went to the house that night to talk, to explain, to make him understand that the money I took was an investment in the future of Morrison Construction, that I was going to pay it all back. But he wouldn't listen. He said he was going to the police, said I'd destroyed the family name, said Mom would be ashamed of me. His voice hardened. He was going to take everything from me. The company, the family legacy, my entire future. What was I supposed to do? Let him destroy me? You were supposed to not murder him, I said incredulously. It was an accident, Daniel said. We argued. It got physical. I picked up the hammer to defend myself. Things got out of control. I didn't mean to. Stop lying, I interrupted. You planned this. You broke into my garage that evening to steal my tools and plant evidence. You used my hammer to kill Dad so my fingerprints would be on the murder weapon. You cleaned up the company records. You fed lies to the police to frame me. None of that was an accident. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled that small smile. You're right. None of it was an accident. I planned every detail, and it would have worked perfectly if not for that damn security camera. The police know, I said. They have the footage of you at my house. They know about the embezzlement. It's over, Daniel. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, the only evidence that absolutely proves I killed Dad is on that flash drive you're holding. Everything else is circumstantial. My lawyer can explain away the video, the financial records, all of it. But Dad's files, those are detailed enough to be a problem. He took a step toward me. So give me the flash drive, Mark. Give it to me, and I'll make sure you come out of this okay. We'll say Dad was confused, that there was no embezzlement, that his death really was a random robbery. We'll rebuild Morrison Construction together, like brothers should, split everything 50-50. You wanted to be part of the family business? Now's your chance. You're insane if you think I'd work with you. Then what's your alternative? His voice went cold. You think you can just walk out of here with that evidence? You think I'm going to let you destroy everything I've built? He pulled something from his jacket pocket. A knife, small but sharp. I didn't want to do this. I really didn't. But you're not leaving me much choice. We stood there in the dusty attic, two brothers, one father dead between us. And I realized Tom had been right. Daniel was dangerous, and I'd walked right into his trap. Time seemed to slow down as I stared at the knife in Daniel's hand. My brother, the person I'd grown up with, the person I'd looked up to as a kid despite everything, the person who'd taught me to throw a football, who'd driven me to my first day of high school, who'd stood beside me at Mom's funeral. Now he was standing in our father's attic with a weapon, ready to kill me to protect his secrets. Daniel, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, think about what you're doing. The police already suspect you. If something happens to me now, they'll know. You can't cover up two murders. I covered up the first one pretty well, framed you perfectly. If it wasn't for random security camera footage, you'd be spending the rest of your life in prison. So yeah, I think I can handle one more. There are people who know I'm here. I lied. My lawyer, Detective Williams, if I don't check in, you're bluffing. You came here alone because you wanted to find Dad's evidence before I did. You didn't tell anyone because you wanted to be the hero who solves everything. Classic Mark, always trying to prove you're as good as me, always falling short. He was right. I hadn't told anyone, and now I was going to pay for that mistake. Give me the flash drive, Daniel repeated. Last chance, little brother. My hand tightened around the small piece of metal and plastic. Dad's final gift, the truth he died trying to protect. "No," I said. Daniel lunged forward. I dodged sideways, stumbling over a box of Christmas decorations. The knife whistled past my arm, close enough that I felt the air move. I scrambled backward, trying to put distance between us, but the attic was cramped and cluttered. Daniel came at me again, faster this time. I grabbed an old wooden chair, something from Mom's sewing corner that had been stored up here for years, and threw it at him. It hit his shoulder and knocked him off balance. I tried to make it to the attic stairs, but he recovered quickly and blocked my path. "You can't win this," Daniel said, breathing hard. "You've never been able to beat me at anything. Not sports, not school, not Dad's affection. What makes you think you can win now?" "Because I'm not trying to beat you," I said. "I'm trying to stop you." He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Stop me? Mark, I've been 10 steps ahead of you your entire life. Do you really think?" A sound from downstairs cut him off, the front door opening. Voices. "Police, Richard Morrison's residence. If anyone's in here, identify yourself." Daniel's face went pale. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything, but apparently someone had seen lights in Dad's house and called the cops." "Up here! In the attic! I need help!" "Shut up," he hissed, moving toward me with the knife. But the footsteps were already pounding up the stairs, multiple sets, cops responding to a potential burglary, maybe expecting danger. "Drop the weapon," a voice bellowed from the attic entrance. "Drop it now!" 2 officers appeared at the top of the stairs, guns drawn. Behind them, I could see a 3rd officer, and behind her, Detective Williams. Daniel froze, the knife still in his hand, his face cycling through emotions. Panic, rage, calculation. For a moment, I thought he might actually attack the officers, go out in a blaze rather than face arrest. But then his shoulders slumped, and the knife clattered to the floor. "Hands on your head," the 1st officer commanded. "Do it now." Daniel complied, moving slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. Even in defeat, there was something defiant in his gaze. Something that said this wasn't over. The officers moved in, cuffing Daniel and pulling him toward the stairs. Detective Williams stayed back, looking at me and then at the file box I was standing next to. "Mark Morrison," she said. "Want to tell me what you're doing at a crime scene?" "Looking for this," I said, holding up the flash drive. "It's the evidence my father compiled about the embezzlement, everything he discovered about Daniel stealing from Morrison Construction. He told me about it before he died, but I didn't know where he'd hidden it." "And you didn't think to call the police?" Detective Williams asked, her voice sharp. "You thought breaking into a crime scene and conducting your own investigation was the smart move?" "I wasn't thinking clearly," I admitted. "I just wanted to find the truth. I wanted to prove Daniel killed Dad." "Well, congratulations. You nearly got yourself killed in the process." She took the flash drive from my hand with a gloved hand, then gestured at the file box. "That too?" "Everything in there is Dad's documentation. Financial records, emails, photographs, 2 years' worth of evidence." Detective Williams looked at the box, then back at me. "You're lucky we got here when we did. Mrs. Chen saw lights in the house and got worried. She called it in as a possible burglary. We were already in the area bringing your brother in for questioning about his presence at your garage the night of the murder. When we got the call about this address, I had a feeling we'd find you both here." "You were bringing him in anyway?" "We've been building a case all day. The security footage, the financial records your lawyer uncovered, everything was pointing toward Daniel. We were planning to arrest him tonight. But finding him here, threatening you with a knife, trying to destroy evidence, that makes everything a lot easier." Downstairs, I could hear Daniel being read his rights. His voice rose in protest, no doubt demanding his expensive lawyer. "Come on," Detective Williams said. "Let's get you out of here." I followed her down the attic stairs, through the house I'd grown up in, past the garage where my father had died. Daniel was already being loaded into a patrol car outside, his face a mask of fury through the window. Our eyes met one more time as I walked past, and this time, there was no smile, no sense of victory, just rage and the beginning of understanding that he'd finally lost. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, interviews, and revelations. The flash drive Dad had hidden contained everything. Spreadsheets detailing every fraudulent transaction, emails proving Daniel had set up shell companies to funnel money out of Morrison Construction. Even audio recordings Dad had made during conversations with Daniel where my brother had unwittingly incriminated himself. Dad had been thorough, meticulous. He knew exactly what he was documenting and why. The prosecutor charged Daniel with first-degree murder, embezzlement, fraud, and attempted assault. The evidence was overwhelming. Even Richard Klein, with all his expensive expertise, couldn't spin this one away. Daniel tried to make a deal, testify about the embezzlement in exchange for a lighter sentence on the murder charge. The prosecutor refused. They had everything they needed without his cooperation. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I sat in the gallery every day, watching my brother try to lie his way out of the truth, watching his perfect mask crack and crumble under the weight of evidence, watching the jury's faces as they saw him for what he really was. Tom sat beside me most days, occasionally explaining legal procedures or predicting how the testimony would play out. He'd become more than just my lawyer. He'd become a friend through all of this. "How are you holding up?" he asked me during a recess on the second week of trial. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me feels vindicated, relieved that the truth is finally out. But another part of me is just sad. That's still my brother up there. We grew up in the same house. We had the same parents. How did we end up here?" "That's not on you," Tom said firmly. "Daniel made his choices. He chose to steal, he chose to kill, he chose to frame you. None of that is your fault." "I know, but I keep thinking about what Mom said before she died, about not letting resentment poison me, about accepting that Daniel was who he was. If I'd listened to her, if I'd just let go of my anger at being overlooked, maybe I could have seen what he was becoming. Maybe I could have stopped this before Dad died." "Or maybe Daniel would have killed you too," Tom said bluntly. "Mark, your brother is a sociopath. He cared about himself and his own interests and nothing else. Not you, not your father, probably not even your mother. You couldn't have fixed him or changed him or saved him. The only thing you could do, the only thing you did do, was survive him and make sure he faced justice." I nodded slowly. Tom was right, but it still hurt. The moment of truth came during Daniel's testimony. His lawyer had advised against him taking the stand, but Daniel had insisted. He was still convinced he could charm the jury, manipulate the narrative, make them see things his way. The prosecutor tore him apart. "Mr. Morrison, you've testified that you went to your brother's house on the night of the murder to borrow tools. Is that correct?" "Yes," he said smoothly. "Mark and I often borrowed things from each other. It wasn't unusual. But you entered his garage at 6:23 p.m., correct? According to the security footage?" "If that's what the timestamp shows, yes." "And according to phone records, you called your brother at 5:47 p.m. that evening to ask if you could borrow these tools, but he didn't answer. In fact, you left a voicemail. Do you remember what you said in that voicemail?" He hesitated. "Not specifically." "Let me refresh your memory." The prosecutor played the voicemail for the jury. Daniel's voice, casual and friendly. "Hey Mark, it's me. Need to borrow your compound saw for a project. I'll swing by your place later to grab it. Talk soon." The prosecutor paused the recording. "So you told your brother you'd swing by later to borrow a tool. But according to the security footage, you were already at his house less than 40 minutes after leaving that voicemail, before he even got home from work, and you used a key to enter his garage, rather than waiting for him to answer the door. Does that sound like normal brotherly borrowing to you?" "I knew his schedule," Daniel said, but his confidence was wavering. I knew he'd be home soon. I didn't want to wait. Or, the prosecutor said, you went there specifically while he was gone so you could take his tools without him knowing, so you could steal a hammer that would have his fingerprints on it, so you could begin framing your brother for a murder you were planning to commit that very night. That's not... You killed your father with a hammer taken from your brother's garage, a hammer with your brother's fingerprints on it. Then you placed that hammer at the crime scene, called the police, played the devastated son, and pointed investigators toward Mark. Isn't that the truth, Mr. Morrison? No, I loved my father. I would never.
You loved his company. You loved the money. You loved the power. But when he discovered you'd been stealing from him for years, when he threatened to expose you, to disinherit you, to destroy everything you'd built on fraud and lies, you killed him. That's not what happened. Then explain the evidence, Mr. Morrison. Explain the security footage. Explain the financial records. Explain why you were at your brother's house the night of the murder. Explain why your father's blood was found in the trunk of your car. The courtroom went silent. This was new information, something the prosecutor had been holding back. We didn't find it at first, the prosecutor continued. You cleaned very thoroughly, but forensic analysis found microscopic blood spatter in the carpeting of your trunk, your father's blood, which means after you killed him in his garage, you put him, or something covered in his blood, in your trunk. Then you cleaned up, staged the scene to look like Mark had done it, and drove away. Isn't that what happened? Daniel's face had gone white. I want to invoke my Fifth Amendment right. Too late for that, Mr. Morrison. You chose to testify. Now answer the question. Did you kill your father? The silence stretched. Daniel looked at his lawyer, who was frantically shaking his head. Then he looked at the jury, then at me. And for the first time in his life, Daniel couldn't lie his way out. He was gonna destroy me, Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built. He was gonna take it all away over some money. Money I was gonna pay back. Money the company could afford to lose. But he didn't care about my plans or my future. He only cared about his precious principles. The prosecutor let the confession hang in the air. No further questions. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Daniel showed no emotion when the verdict was read. He just sat there, staring straight ahead, while his lawyer frantically took notes about appeals and legal options. At sentencing, 2 weeks later, Daniel finally looked at me. You could have helped me, he said as the guards prepared to take him away. We could have worked together, split everything, built something great. But you chose Dad's side. You chose to destroy me. I chose the truth, I said quietly. That's all. You destroyed yourself, Daniel. He laughed, that same bitter sound I'd heard in the attic. I've won, little brother. Congratulations. I hope it was worth it. The judge sentenced him to life without parole for Dad's murder, plus additional years for the embezzlement and attempted assault. Daniel would spend the rest of his life in prison. As they led him away, he didn't look back. After everything was settled legally, I had to deal with the practical reality of what came next. Morrison Construction was a mess. Daniel's embezzlement had done serious damage, and the company's reputation had taken a hit from all the negative publicity. Several clients had canceled contracts. Key employees had left. But Dad's lawyer, Janet Torres, came through in the end. She produced a copy of the will Dad had been working on before he died, the one that would have left everything to me. Even though it hadn't been formally executed, she argued to the probate court that Dad's intent was clear, especially given the circumstances of his death. The court agreed. Everything Dad had owned, Morrison Construction, the house, his savings, came to me. I could have sold it all, walked away from the family business, from the memories, from everything, started fresh somewhere new. But that's not what Dad would have wanted.
So I kept Morrison Construction, hired an experienced manager to help me learn the business, started rebuilding the reputation Dad and my grandfather had spent decades creating. It was hard work, harder than anything I'd ever done. But there was something satisfying about it too. About honoring Dad's legacy the right way. About proving that the Morrison name could still mean something good. I also reached out to the other victims of Daniel's embezzlement. Small subcontractors he'd stiffed, suppliers he'd cheated. Using what was left of the company's resources and some of my own savings, I paid back what I could. Wasn't everything, but it was something. It was the right thing to do. One evening, about 6 months after Daniel's sentencing, I was working late at the Morrison Construction office when Tom stopped by. "You got a visitor," he said. I looked up to see a woman in her 70s standing in the doorway. It took me a moment to recognize her. "Mrs. Chen," I said, standing quickly. "Please come in." "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, settling into a chair. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by." "Not at all. I've been meaning to thank you. If you hadn't installed that security camera, if you hadn't called the police that night." "You would have found another way," she said firmly. "I could tell from the moment I met you that you were a good man. Your brother? Well, some people are just born with something missing inside them, but you're not like that. You're like your father." "I hope so," I said quietly. "You knew my father, you know. We served on the town council together for years. He was a good man, honest, fair. He would be proud of what you're doing with his company." "I'm trying. It's not easy." "Good things are rarely easy." She smiled. "I actually came by to tell you something. I'm selling my house, moving to California to be near my daughter. But I wanted you to know, your mother used to stop by sometimes when she was sick. We'd have tea together. She talked a lot about you." "She did?" "Oh, yes. She was so proud of you. She said you had a good heart, that you saw people clearly, that you'd do important things with your life. She was right." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Thank you for telling me that." She also said she worried about Daniel, that there was something cold in him that scared her sometimes. She hoped she was wrong, but I think deep down she knew. Mothers always know. After Mrs. Chen left, I sat alone in Dad's office, my office now, and thought about my parents. Mom, who's seen the best in me even when I couldn't see it myself. Dad, who'd finally recognized the truth before it was too late. Both of them gone now. Both of them leaving me with a legacy I didn't ask for, but would honor anyway. I pulled out the flash drive, the one with all Dad's evidence, which the police had returned to me after the trial. I plugged it into my computer and opened the last file Dad had created. It was a video, recorded 3 days before his death. Dad's face filled the screen, looking tired but determined. "Mark, if you're watching this, then something's happened to me, and Daniel is probably responsible." I watched as Dad explained everything, the embezzlement, his investigation, his plans to go to the police and change his will, all of it laid out in his methodical, careful way. But at the end, Dad's expression softened. "Son, I know I wasn't the father you deserved. I favored Daniel because he reminded me of myself, the good parts and the bad parts. But you reminded me of your mother. You have her kindness, her integrity, her ability to see people's true nature. I took that for granted. I thought those qualities were common, when really, they're rare, they're precious. Morrison Construction is yours now. Do with it what you think is right. But more than that, live your life with the same honesty and decency you've always shown. Don't let Daniel's betrayal make you bitter or cynical. Don't let my mistakes make you doubt your own worth. You're a good man, Mark. You always have been. And I'm sorry it took me so long to tell you that. I love you, son. I'm proud of you. And I always will be." The video ended. I sat there in the quiet office, crying for the father I'd lost and the relationship we've never quite had. But also feeling something else. Peace. Because in the end, Dad had seen me. Really seen me. And that was enough. 2 years have passed since Daniel was sentenced. I'm standing in the cemetery on a gray October morning, looking at the headstones side by side. Mom's on the left, Dad's on the right. Simple granite markers with their names, dates, and a single line beneath each. Carol Morrison, beloved wife and mother. Her kindness touched countless lives. Richard Morrison, devoted husband and father. He built with integrity and honor. I come here every few months, not because I feel obligated, but because sometimes I need to talk to them, to tell them what's happening, to ask for guidance I know won't come but somehow helps anyway, just by asking. Business is good, I say out loud, feeling only slightly ridiculous talking to stone markers. We finished the new community center last month. The mayor said it was the best construction work the town has seen in years. I think you'd be proud, Dad. A cool breeze rustles the leaves on the oak tree shading their graves. Emma, you remember Emma, the girl who used to work reception at the office? She's pregnant, due in December. I'm going to be a godfather. Never thought I'd be in that position, but she says I'm the most responsible person she knows. Wonder where I got that from, Mom. I'm quiet for a moment, then continue. Daniel filed another appeal last month, 5th one so far. Tom says it won't go anywhere. The evidence was too solid, the conviction too clean. But Daniel keeps trying. I guess he still thinks he can charm or manipulate his way out of this. Some people never change. That's the hard truth I've had to accept. Daniel is who he is. He didn't become a murderer overnight. The seeds were always there. The narcissism, the sense of entitlement, the belief that he deserved whatever he wanted regardless of who got hurt. Mom saw it. Dad eventually saw it. I just didn't want to believe it until the evidence was literally staring me in the face. I don't visit him, Daniel, I mean. He's written me a few times from prison, but I haven't read the letters. Tom offered to screen them for me, but I told him to just return them unopened. I don't have anything to say to my brother anymore. Maybe that makes me a bad person. Maybe I should try to forgive him, find some kind of peace with him, but I can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I sit down on the bench facing their graves, the one I'd installed last year so I'd have somewhere to sit during these visits. I've been thinking a lot about family lately, about what it means. I used to think family was automatic. You're born into it, you're stuck with it, you have to love each other no matter what. But I don't think that's true anymore. I think family is about the people who see you, support you, choose you. Blood doesn't guarantee that. Sometimes the people who share your DNA are the ones who hurt you most. The truth is, I've built a new family over the past 2 years. Not a replacement for what I lost, but something different. Something I chose and that chose me back. Tom and his wife Sarah have become close friends. They have me over for dinner at least once a month, and we've fallen into an easy rhythm of friendship that I treasure. The crew at Morrison Construction, the ones who stayed through all the scandal and uncertainty, they've become like brothers to me. Real brothers. The kind who show up when you need them, who have your back, who tell you the truth even when it's hard to hear. And there's Jennifer. I met her 9 months ago at a charity fundraiser for the community center. She's a teacher at the elementary school, warm and funny and patient with my awkwardness. We've been dating for 6 months now, taking things slow, but there's something real there, something that feels like it could last. She knows everything about my family, about Daniel, about Dad's murder. I laid it all out on our third date because I didn't want to build anything on secrets. She listened without judgment, then squeezed my hand and said, "That must have been impossibly hard, but you survived it. You're still here. That says everything about who you are." I'm thinking about asking her to marry me. Not yet. It's too soon. But eventually, when the time is right. "You'd like her, Mom," I say to the headstone. "She has your kindness, your ability to see the good in people without being naive about the bad. And Dad, she's practical, grounded. She'd keep me from getting too caught up in my own head." A car pulls into the cemetery parking lot. I glance over and see it's Tom. He gets out and walks over, his hands in his pockets. "Thought I might find you here." "What's up?" I ask. "Got some news. The final distribution from Daniel's embezzlement restitution came through. The court has authorized the remaining funds to be paid out to the affected parties. After Daniel was convicted, the court had ordered that whatever could be recovered from his assets, his car, his condo, his investments, be used to pay back the people he'd stolen from. It wasn't the full amount, but it was something." "How much?" I ask. "Another $43,000, split between Morrison Construction and the subcontractors he stiffed. I've got checks for everyone." $43,000 wouldn't undo the damage Daniel had caused, but it would help. "There's something else," Tom says. "I wanted to tell you in person. Daniel's latest appeal was formally denied this morning. The state Supreme Court refused to hear it. His legal options are essentially exhausted." I nod slowly. "So, that's really it. He's in prison for life." "He's in prison for life," Tom confirms. "How do you feel about that?" "You know what's strange?" I say eventually. "For years, I wanted Dad to see me, to value me the way he valued Daniel, to give me a chance to prove I was worthy of the family business, the family name, all of it. And now I have all those things, but not the way I wanted them. I got them because my brother destroyed everything and my father died. That's not how it was supposed to happen." "No, it's not. But Mark, you've taken a tragedy and turned it into something good. Morrison Construction is thriving. You've paid back your brother's victims. You've honored your father's legacy in a way Daniel never could have. That matters." "I guess. It does matter. Your parents would be proud of you. Not because of what you inherited, but because of what you chose to do with it. That's the difference between you and Daniel. He felt entitled to everything and destroyed it. You felt you didn't deserve anything and built something anyway." Tom stands up, preparing to leave. "I'll let you get back to your visit. Just wanted to update you on the appeal." "Thanks, Tom, for everything. Not just the legal stuff, but everything." He claps me on the shoulder. "That's what friends do." After he's gone, I turn back to my parents' graves. "So that's it," I say. "Daniel's out of options. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. And I'll spend the rest of mine trying to live up to the legacy you left behind." I think about what that legacy really is. It's not just Morrison Construction or the house or any material thing. It's the values Mom and Dad tried to instill, even if they didn't always succeed. Honesty, integrity, hard work, taking care of people, doing the right thing even when it's difficult. Daniel rejected all of that. He chose the easy path, the selfish path, the path that led to prison and ruin. I'm choosing differently. "I miss you both," I say quietly. "I wish you were here to see how things turned out. I wish we had more time together. I wish a lot of things were different. But I'm grateful for what I did have, and I promise I'll take care of what you left behind. I stand up, brushing leaves off the bench. As I turn to leave, something catches my eye. A small white envelope tucked under the edge of Mom's headstone, held down by a smooth river rock. I pick it up. My name is written on the front in handwriting I don't recognize. Inside is a single piece of paper, a letter. Mark, you don't know me, but I knew your mother. I was a patient of hers at the hospital during the last year of her life. I was going through chemotherapy, terrified and alone, and your mother took time every day to sit with me, to talk to me, to make me feel like a person instead of a diagnosis. She saved my life. Not medically, the doctors did that, but emotionally. She gave me hope when I had none. She reminded me why life was worth fighting for. She talked about you often, about her younger son who had such a good heart, who cared for her when she was sick, who never asked for recognition but deserved it anyway. She was so proud of you, Mark. She told me you were the best thing she'd ever done in her life. I read about what happened with your father and brother. I can't imagine how painful that must have been. But I wanted you to know that your mother saw who you really were, and she loved you for it. I'm healthy now, in remission for 3 years. I have a good life, a family, a future. All because your mother cared enough to see me as human when I felt invisible. You come from good people, Mark. Don't ever forget that. With gratitude, Melissa Chen. I read the letter twice, then carefully fold it and put it back in the envelope. Mrs. Chen's daughter, the patient Mom had cared for. Another life Mom had touched with her kindness. And suddenly I understand something I'd been struggling with for 2 years. Mom and Dad's legacy isn't just what they left to me. It's not Morrison Construction or the house or any material thing. It's the lives they touched, the people they helped, the difference they made just by being decent, honest, caring human beings. That's what I'm trying to live up to. Not some impossible standard of perfection, but simply the standard of being a good person who tries to do right by others. Daniel never understood that. He thought legacy was about wealth and power and what you could take from the world. But real legacy is about what you give, what you build, who you help, how you make people feel. I pocket the letter and take one last look at my parents' graves. So that's it, I say. Daniel's out of options. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. And I'll spend the rest of mine trying to live up to the legacy you left behind. I think about what that legacy really is. It's not just Morrison Construction or the house or any material thing. It's the lives they touched, the people they helped, the difference they made just by being decent, honest, caring human beings. That's what I'm trying to live up to. Not some impossible standard of perfection, but simply the standard of being a good person who tries to do right by others. Daniel never understood that. He thought legacy was about wealth and power and what you could take from the world. But real legacy is about what you give, what you build, who you help, how you make people feel. I pocket the letter and take one last look at my parents' graves. So that's it, I say. Daniel's out of options. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. And I'll spend the rest of mine trying to live up to the legacy you left behind. I think about what that legacy really is. It's not just Morrison Construction or the house or any material thing. It's the lives they touched, the people they helped, the difference they made just by being decent, honest, caring human beings. That's what I'm trying to live up to. Not some impossible standard of perfection, but simply the standard of being a good person who tries to do right by others. Daniel never understood that.
He thought legacy was about wealth and power and what you could take from the world. But real legacy is about what you give, what you build, who you help, how you make people feel. I pocket the letter and take one last look at my parents' graves. So that's it, I say. Daniel's out of options. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. And I'll spend the rest of mine trying to live up to the legacy you left behind. I think about what that legacy really is. It's not just Morrison Construction or the house or any material thing. It's the lives they touched, the people they helped, the difference they made just by being decent, honest, caring human beings. That's what I'm trying to live up to. Not some impossible standard of perfection, but simply the standard of being a good person who tries to do right by others. Daniel never understood that. He thought legacy was about wealth and power and what you could take from the world. But real legacy is about what you give, what you build, who you help, how you make people feel. I pocket the letter and take one last look at my parents' graves. So that's it, I say. Daniel's out of options. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. And I'll spend the rest of mine trying to live up to the legacy you left behind. I think about what that legacy really is. It's not just Morrison Construction or the house or any material thing. It's the lives they touched, the people they helped, the difference they made just by being decent, honest, caring human beings. That's what I'm trying to live up to. Not some impossible standard of perfection, but simply the standard of being a good person who tries to do right by others. Daniel never understood that. He thought legacy was about wealth and power and what you could take from the world. But real legacy is about what you give, what you build, who you help, how you make people feel. I pocket the letter and take one last look at my parents' graves. So that's it, I say. Daniel's out of options. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. And I'll spend the rest of mine trying to live up to the legacy you left behind. I think about what that legacy really is. It's not just Morrison Construction or the house or any material thing. It's the lives they touched, the people they helped, the difference they made just by being decent, honest, caring human beings. That's what I'm trying to live up to. Not some impossible standard of perfection, but simply the standard of being a good person who tries to do right by others. Daniel never understood that. He thought legacy was about wealth and power and what you could take from the world. But real legacy is about what you give, what you build, who you help, how you make people feel. I pocket the letter and take one last look at my parents' graves. So that's it, I say. Daniel's out of options. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. And I'll spend the rest of mine trying to live up to the legacy you left behind. I think about what